So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about crop rotations. So how to kind of rotate crops in your vegetable garden. Regardless of how small a vegetable garden you have, you should try and rotate what things you plant at which time. So there's a few reasons for why that is. One is because by avoiding planting the same thing in the same place every year, you discourage pests, because pests will generally stay in the soil after, that's where they'll hibernate under your mulch or whatever. And so if their preferred plant grows right in the same spot, they're right there and they're ready to take advantage of that. So by moving the plant around, the different kinds of plants, then you'll find that over time you don't get those same buildup of pests and diseases for that matter too. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that different categories of plants take different nutrients from the soil, and some of them add nutrients back in, and so all the more reason to rotate them around so that way you can kind of make better use of the soil. So there's lots of different kind of schools of thought about this, and some are more complicated than others. I generally go for a three plot rotation, just because it's easier for me to kind of pay attention to, and it just doesn't get to be too much for me. So what I'll always start out with is I start out with legumes. So legumes are things like peas, beans, soybeans, if you want to grow like edamame or something. They're all what they call nitrogen fixers. So they will actually take nitrogen in from the air, and then they put it down back into the soil. They sequester it down into the soil. So that actually is a great thing for then other years for those plants to access. And the other thing about that first rotation is that because they're able to pull that nitrogen out of the air, they don't really need as much compost and as much fertilizer as your second rotation will. And the second rotation, so the second thing you're going to put in there after, so one year you grow beans, and then the next year you're going to grow just general vegetables. And this is where people might divide them up, but I don't bother. So general vegetables being like your tomatoes, your eggplants, your celery, even your what they call brassicas, which are like kale, and Brussels sprouts and broccoli. I'll put them all together in one group. And those are the ones that tend to need the most fertilizer, because they tend to take a lot more out of the soil. They need a lot more. So if you're going to think about what area of your garden to put more effort in as far as mulching, as far as composting and that kind of stuff, it's really that second rotation, the general vegetable rotation. And then the last one that I do is then root vegetables. So things like carrots, like beets, like onions, garlic, all those things, turnips even. So all those things, that can go into the third rotation. And the reason why you do it that way is because root vegetables really actually don't need much fertilizer either. In fact, if you put too much fertilizer or compost on top of your root vegetables, they'll actually fork, and they put up a lot of green, but they don't really develop their roots as much. So you don't really want to put compost or fertilizer on your root crops. So that way you've got your beans going in, or your legumes going in first. So they're going to fix the nitrogen for the heavy feeders, which are the general vegetables. They're going to come next. All right. And then you're going to add, that's where you're going to add your compost on. And then they're going to use up all that nutrients. And then the last thing you put down in there is your root crop. And then they're not going to need as much. But then by then the soil is depleted. So then you really need to put in the beans again, and you start over again with that same cycle. So it's a 3-year cycle, and that's what I do, and it works pretty well. And so you make the best use of the nutrients in the soil, and then you also avoid those pests, right, by kind of trying to mix things around. And the best way to kind of pay attention to what you've got where, if you only have a small plot, is to create a diagram of that plot, so that way you can kind of remember year by year what went in there. We're a little bit luckier because we have really kind of, our garden actually is divided up in 3. So I just move it from one to the other, and it's pretty easy for me to remember because it was pretty big. But that would be kind of how I would recommend that you do it if you're starting out with a small plot. Now, if you're starting out with a really small plot, you may just fertilize the whole thing and hope for the best. That's okay, but I still would rotate the crops. All right, and that is, you're more likely to have success that way. All right, now, so that's it for crop rotation. If you have any questions, please just put them down in the comments section. I'm happy to answer them. And I've got a mosquito flying around me. So, and then if you like this channel, please subscribe, press the subscribe button. And then you can also press the bell if you want to get notifications when I put up a new video. All right, thank you very much for stopping by.